now we get into some of the trickier algebra problems. If you look at this, I've got 5 steps. So we have 5 questions we need to ask ourselves when looking at a complex algebraic equation. The first question we ask is, are there grouping symbols? Grouping symbols would be like parentheses. So are there parentheses in that problem? So if we look at our problem right here, no, there are not grouping symbols. So we don't have to do that. Step 2, are there like terms? So we look on each side. So if I were to cover up this side and just look over here, are there like terms? Well, no. We have 5p and then we have a number by itself, so we can't do anything with that. Then if we looked at this piece, same thing. There's no like terms that we can combine. So let's go to number 3. Variables on both sides. So find the variable. We have that because we have a p on this side of the equal sign and a p on this side. So what we need to do is find the variable with the least coefficient, the smaller coefficient, and move it to the other side by changing the sign. So I'm going to take this p, this 5p over here, and I'm going to subtract it because it's positive p, so we want to do the opposite to move it. That would cancel the p's on this side and leave us with negative 14. And that would leave us with 3p plus 4. All right, so we did number 3. Number 4, numbers on both sides. So we have 14 over here and 4 over here. If you even look at this, it's like the problems we did ahead of before. So what we want to do is we want to subtract that 4 from both sides of that equal. We'd cancel out, leave us with 3p over here. Then negative 14 minus 4 will give us negative 18. And then our last step is just to divide by that coefficient with p. So p equals negative 6 because negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6. So let's look at another one. So let's look at number 2. I went ahead and I have the steps on the bottom of this page as well, so we can refer back to those. So the first step says grouping symbols. Do we have grouping symbols? Yes, we have those parentheses in this first one, so we're going to distribute. Remember, this negative right here is like an invisible negative 1. So we need to distribute a negative 1 to both of those. So I'm going to rewrite this problem. Negative 1 times x will give us negative x, and negative 1 times positive 4 will give us negative 4. So, done with number 1. Step 2, combine like terms. So if we look at either side of the equal sign, there are no like terms to combine. So done with step 2. 3, variables on both sides. Do we have variables on both sides? No, the x is already on one side. So done with 3. Numbers on both sides. Well, yeah, we have the negative 8 and negative 4. So we want to move the number that's on the same side as the variable to the other side. So plus 4 plus 4 will give us negative x, and then negative 8 plus 4 will give us negative 4. Now, it may look like we're done, but we still have one more step, that divide step. And you might ask, okay, what do I have to divide? Remember, anytime you have just that negative, there's an invisible 1. So we've got to divide by negative 1 on both sides, which will give us x equals 4. All right, so let's look at number 3. I'm going to erase these check marks so we know to go back and do all of our steps. All right, first is grouping symbols. Are there grouping symbols? No, no parentheses or brackets. Like terms, combine like terms on the same side. Okay, so we have p minus 1, can't combine anything there. We've got 5p plus 3p. Well, if we look at that, 5p and positive 3p, those can be combined. So 5p plus 3p equals 8p. So I'm going to rewrite this whole problem. So that's number 2. We're done with step 2. Step 3, variables on both sides. We have p on this side and 8 on this side, 8p on this side. So it says to find the variable with the least coefficient, so the smallest number in front of it, and move it to the other side of the sign. So we have just 1p over here, so I'm going to move that 1p over. So I'm going to say minus 1p. And I'm going to draw that invisible 1 just so that I don't forget about it. That cancels out, and I'm left with just negative 1. Then I'm going to subtract negative 1p, which gives us 7p minus 8. And you might ask, okay, why don't I do minus 1p here and minus 1p here? But you have to remember, we have to combine it with the number that has the same last name. That 8 does not have the same last name as that 1p. So we cannot combine those. All right, so that is number 3. Numbers on both sides. So we're going to go ahead, get rid of that 8 on this side, and move it to this side. So I'm going to cross that out. Negative 1 plus 8 will give us positive 7 equals 7p. Last step is to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 7, which will leave us with p equals 1. All right, last one together. So go through our steps. Do we have grouping symbols? Yes, so let's go ahead and distribute. So I'm going to write that 12 over again, equals negative 4 times negative 6x. If we think back to when we were doing polynomials, we're going to take that negative 4 times negative 6 and then add that x to the end. So we have positive 24x. Then negative 4 times negative 3 will give us positive 12. So that's our first step. Like terms on both sides. If we look at both sides, nothing we can combine on the same side. Variables on both sides. No, we don't have any x's on the side with the 12. So we're done with step 3. Step 4, numbers on both sides. We have a 12 on this side and a 12 on this side. So let's go ahead, subtract the 12 that's on the same side as the x, which will give us 0 equals 24x. So we're done with step 4. Last step is to divide. So we're going to divide by 24 on both sides. X equals 0. All right, so go ahead and try these practice problems on your own. And remember, make sure you have those 5 steps written in your notes. Ask yourself the same 5 questions every time. Remember, if we are doing the same steps every time, the same process, when you get into the test, you're going to remember that same process. So we're teaching our brain to do the same steps over and over and over again. So go ahead and try these on your own. Let's look at these practice problems. So let's go through our 5 steps. So do we have grouping symbols in this first one? Nope, no parentheses or brackets, so we can move on to step 2. Combine like terms on the same side. So if we look at both sides of that equals, nothing I can combine on either side, so let's move on to step 3. Variables on both sides. So we've got a p on this side and a p on this side. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to subtract a p from over here. So it cancels out. I'm left with negative 4 equals negative 9. Ooh. What you should have found is that you can't go anywhere. And if you look at what's left, negative 4 equals negative 9, that doesn't make sense. So there is no solution to this problem? I know that was kind of a trick question to give you, but I wanted you to kind of think about it. There was no solution though, because -4 does not equal -9. And you might see a question like that on your test. So let's go ahead and look at number 2. Start with our first step. Do we have grouping symbols? No parentheses, no brackets. So now to number 2. Like terms on both sides. So if we look at both sides of that equal sign, no like terms there, no like terms there. So number 2 is done. So let's look at number 3. Variables on both sides. Well, yeah, we have an a on this side and a -5a on this side. So let's go ahead and subtract this a. 1a. Remember, it's like an invisible 1 in front of there. So that cancels out, and I'm left with 5 equals -5 minus -1a gives us -6a plus 5. So that is number 3. Now we deal with the numbers on both sides. So let's go ahead and subtract that 5 from both sides. We're left with -6a on this side, 0 on this side. Then divide by -6, which is step 5. And that gives us a equals 0, because if you take 0 divided by -6, you'll get 0. So go ahead and look at these next 2 practice problems. Number 3, first step, do we have grouping symbols? And if we look here, we do have parentheses, so it's a negative, and remember there's like an invisible 1 right there. So we distribute that -1, bring the 14 down. So -1 times positive p gives us negative p. -1 times -8 will give us positive 8. So that's step 1. Step 2, like terms. See if there are like terms on the same side. Nothing we can combine with the 14, nothing we can combine over here, so that step 2 is done. Step 3, variables on both sides. There's 14 by itself, there's no p on that side. So number 3 is done. Numbers on both sides. So then let's go ahead and get that p by itself. Subtract 8 from both sides. Left with negative p on this side, and then 14 minus 8 will give us positive 6. And then again, you might think that you're done, but that's a negative p. We still need to divide by that invisible 1. So negative 6 divided by -1 will give us p equals -6. Sorry. All right, so let's look at number 4. So grouping symbols, we do have those parentheses, so that's like an invisible 1. Let's distribute that -1. -1 times 7 will give us -7. -1 times -4x will give us positive 4x. And I'll bring that 9 down. So that is step 1. Step 2, like terms on both sides. Nothing we can combine on this side of the equal sign. And then that 9 is by itself. So that is step 2. Step 3, variables on both sides. Nope, there's x's only on one side of the equal sign. So step 3 is done. Step 4, numbers on both sides. Yep, so we need to get rid of that -7 that's on the same side as that x. So let's add 7 to both sides. So we have 4x equals 9 plus 7 will give us 16. That is step 4. Now step 5 is to divide. So we'll divide by 4 both sides. Because remember, 4x is like saying 4 times x. So to get x by itself, we're going to do the opposite, and we're going to divide, which will give us x equals positive 4. So here are some practice problems to try on your own, and then we'll come back together.